The Consciously Curious Show is the place to inspire or satisfy your curiosity. Hi, and welcome to the Consciously Curious Show. I'm Peggy Sue Skipper, and this is a platform for interesting people with interesting stories, which have led them to a career or a cause or a motivation to help other people. That's what the Consciously Curious Show is all about. And today I am delighted to have with me Dr. Verdi Lethermon. Welcome.
Thank you.
So good to have you with me today.
So good to be here.
You know, and let me just start this out by saying that I heard it said once that when we pray, we talk to God.
Yes.
But when do we let God talk to us? And that's really what you're all about, right?
Sure. And you can start easily by letting God talk to you when you're praying to Him. And you just need to be sensitive to the fact that even while you're talking, He wants to speak to you. So when you're praying is a perfectly good time to let God speak to you.
Okay. And you do this all the time, right? That's really who you've become.
God and I have an ongoing conversation throughout the day, whether I'm praying or whether I'm just still and quiet. He's always giving me some information about what He wants me to know, and it's ongoing.
Okay. So there are some people who would like cart us off to the padded rooms for talking about this. You know, it's like, come on, wait a minute.
Yeah.
But this is a real piece of your life,
Yes.
Dr. Verdi, and
Yes.
I know that. But could you share with me a little bit about how you came to the awareness that God was actually speaking to you?
I remember the day like it was yesterday. I needed to make a decision about attending a funeral with my father. And it meant that I would have to leave my young children at home with my husband, and he would have been a single dad for 5 days. And I was torn about that. And so I wanted God's direction to help me make a decision about how I should approach that. And so I prayed, "Dear God, help me make this decision." And what He said to me, in a way that I recognized it was Him speaking to me, was honor your mother and father. And I laugh now because I thought it was funny that God sounded like He sounded in the Bible. And I was curious because I didn't know what that meant and how that really applied to the decision that I was trying to make. But as I quieted myself and thought about it, I realized He was telling me to do what my dad had asked me to do. And that was the answer that I needed. And so I spoke with my husband and I said, can we make this happen together? And he was willing to support me. And I went to the funeral with my father, and God gave me the peace about it. And then my husband and I were able to work out the details.
So was that a surprise to you that you were able to work out those details? I'm just curious.
It was a surprise because it was easier than I had expected it to be. I thought I would get a little more pushback, but after God told me what to do, it only made sense that what followed would be easier than I expected it to be.
So would you say that, from your experience, that when you follow the guidance, because that's really what it is, right? Wouldn't you call it guidance?
Absolutely, the counsel.
So when you follow the guidance that you get from God, things just go easier in general?
Most of the time, but that doesn't mean that what He tells me is going to make life smooth all the time, because there are times when God says things I don't want to hear and that I don't like necessarily, but if I follow His lead, it's still an easier path, a smoother path than I might have expected before I did what He told me to do.
Okay. So the whole funeral story that you just told it's a really good example of that. But give me another example that sticks out in your mind of when, you know, it might have been a little bit problematic to follow the guidance.
Well, I remember when my youngest child was about to go to pre-K, and I needed to decide whether to send him to pre-K because he was a September child, or whether to leave him with the babysitter. And for a mom, and that was my baby, that was not an easy decision. And I was struggling what to do. And God's voice said to me so simplistically, "Go check out the classroom, Mom." And that was such an easy, simple, straightforward answer, but it never dawned on me just to go to the school and sit in the classroom and see what I thought. So I did that, And I fell in love with the teacher. She fell in love with Cameron, and the rest is history. But I was struggling with that. And I needed, my babysitter wouldn't tell me, my husband wouldn't tell me. And so I said, God, please help me make this decision. And the rest is history.
But you ultimately made the decision yourself.
Yes.
So
yes.
I think that's a very interesting thing to point out and to understand, is that this isn't about anybody telling you how to live your life. It's more about following good guidance.
Right, and because God rarely says yes or no to me. He typically gives me direction that once I follow that direction, then I can make the decision that's consistent with what I think He would have me do.
That's interesting, because I know in a conversation we had before we started taping, you were saying that you had such a wonderful father who also did that. Earth father.
Yes.
Yes, I did too, so we have that in common. And one of the things that I used to say frustrated me so much when I would go to my father with something and he would give me both sides of the story. Or he would say something that wasn't the answer, but...
Sure. The counsel to lead you to make the decision on your own. And that's what my dad did. He said we would, as children, we would know how to think. And that is so consistent with God. He would not have us be robots. He would not have us surrender our will. He would just guide us and counsel us as we live our lives and make our decisions. But He is not a robot kind of God who just says, do this, do that.
So what would you call this relationship that you have? Because really you do have a relationship going on here. And what would you call that?
Oh, absolutely intimacy. Complete intimacy with the Heavenly Father, the creator of the universe. And we have intimacy. And He desires it. He cultivated it. Actually, he chased me down to have this kind of relationship, but it's intimacy, no doubt about it.
And you've actually written, you have 3 books, 2 already out, 1 out soon, 1 geared toward children, 1 geared toward adults, and then your new one will be toward adolescents.
Correct.
So, and those are really about, well, the one for adults anyway, is really about your experiences with this process and what that means to you, right?
Yeah, and I don't want to even call it a process. I want to call it a cultivation of a relationship, because that's where it comes from. It's not a formula. It's not a do this, do that process, but it's the cultivation of a relationship. And as you said earlier, when I talk to God, the more I talk to God, the closer I can become to Him, because He talks back and I know more about Him. So it's just like any other relationship. If you don't interact, if you don't talk, if you don't spend time together, you can't be close. But when you talk, spend time together, you can become closer and closer.
Okay. So have you gotten any flack from anybody about this? I mean, I can see where it might happen.
Sure. And not strong pushback flack. What I've gotten more is just people are just perplexed. No one's ever taught them that. They've never heard God speak to them, so they're a little bit perplexed by the relationship building and how the creator of the universe would be willing to interact with us in a conversational level and on a very personal basis.
It's like some people go, oh, come on, God doesn't have time to talk to one person, right?
Oh, yes.
Well, excuse me, but maybe God has infinite time, and
Yes.
So, and I think the thing that I love about what you're doing, about your books, is that it brings the importance of a personal relationship with, and I'm going to just say, something greater than ourselves. And in your books, that is God.
Sure.
There are lots of different names for God, but that does seem to be, in my opinion, important. And the way you write, and the way you tell your stories, and that's probably the most important part, because Dr. Verdi, your stories are great. So share another one with us that you feel like was pivotal for you.
A painful one I'll share. There was a painful one. That's when my mother was dying, and she was in hospice, so she was very near death. And the director of the hospice came to me and said, we need to move your mom. And I'm just devastated, because my mom is dying, and what he was in essence saying is, your mom's not dying fast enough. So we need to move her from this facility. I was devastated. there was no one to turn to. There was no one to help me resolve this other than God. And I took it to him and I said, God, if this is what you want, then you're going to have to give me direction, and you're going to have to show me what to do with my mom, because I don't have an answer and this is emotionally devastating. And I surrendered to him and I allowed him to lead me, and I was willing to have what he wanted for my mom. And at some point in time after that conversation, the director came back to me and said, we've changed our mind. Your mom can stay. And I'm convinced that out of my communicating with God, he revealed himself to me and affected the director's heart not to make that decision. Now, he didn't come back to me and say, Verdi, this is what's going to happen. But through the actions of the director, I'm convinced that God heard my prayer, answered my prayer through the actions of the director. And I just had such peace because Mama didn't have to move. And she died in the hospice that she was in.
Well, and I think what you're saying is something important for people to realize, that if you're going to have this kind of relationship, that you have to stay aware of how things shift with that relationship.
Yes.
Just like you said, you don't. The director didn't come to you and say, "Hey, look,
Right.
God came to me in a dream last night and said I'm supposed to move your mom." You know.
No.
So.
Yes.
But.
Yes.
But you were aware enough to know that had a shift in the energy of what was going on.
Yes, that's key. Because again, if I'm in a relationship with a person, I don't just talk to you and then walk away in a vacuum like we didn't have a conversation. You are responding, you are reacting, I'm getting energy and feedback from you, and my relationship with God is no different. So I do, that's a key point, and people don't understand that two-sided reciprocal nature of the relationship with God. So absolutely, that's important.
Okay. And have you found that God has a sense of humor in your relationship?
Oh my goodness.
I know,
oh
right?
my goodness. Yes, it's. I think he laughs at me and with me so often and that's a part of my concern about how people view God, is they don't view him as a living, interactive being who has a sense of humor that's incredibly funny. Incredibly funny, yes.
Well, you would think that he would have the greatest of sense of humor, since sense of humor is something he created.
Absolutely. Absolutely, yes. And I love to laugh with God, and I love to imagine how when I meet God face to face, what that will be like, and he'll just give me this look, and I'll know he's saying, remember the day, and I'll know exactly what he's talking about, and I'll just hang my head and walk on into heaven and just enjoy his presence for eternity.
Okay. Well, so the children's book, we're going to talk about that in just a minute. We've got to take a little break, and then we're going to come back and talk about the children's book and the adolescent book that you're working on. So, because I'm really interested in how you focus those toward different age groups.
Perfect.
Okay? Stick with me for a few minutes?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So stick with us. We'll be right back. Dr. Verdi's book for adults is When God Speaks, People Who Hear Are Healed. And her children's book, If God Wanted to Talk to You, Would You Listen? If you'd like more information on Dr. Verdi's books or her practice, visit her website at verdilethermon.com. Or you can contact Dr. Verdi by phone at 281-444-4336 or by email drverdi@verdilethermon.com.